When you think of the early 20th century, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For pretty much all of us, it's one event, the Great War. You know, the story of empires, trenches, and a lost generation. But what if I told you that while the entire world was staring at the battlefield, another, even deadlier enemy was marching across the globe, completely unseen? Well, that's what we're digging into today, an age defined by two enormous, overlapping crises.
So let's frame this whole explainer with one big question. What actually happens when a world is completely mobilized for this unprecedented war, but at the exact same time, a silent, invisible killer starts its own global campaign? And maybe even more important, how does one of these stories end up defining an entire era, while the other one gets, well, almost completely forgotten?
All right, first things first, let's set the stage with the event we all know so well, the Great War.
Yeah, we all learned the basic facts in school, right? A massive conflict, mostly in Europe, that just raged on for 4 incredibly long years. But as you can see, that simple definition barely scratches the surface of a war that would literally engulf the planet and change it forever.
I mean, this was supposed to be the war to end all wars. It didn't just end battles. It shattered empires. It created new nations, and it completely reshaped the political and social landscape of our world. Its shadows stretched across the entire 20th century.
Okay, so that's the big picture. Now to really get what this war felt like, we need to zoom way, way in. From the world map, right down into the mud and the chaos of the front lines.
If a single image could define this war, it's the trenches. And as you can see from the definition here, this was a totally new kind of fighting. A brutal, static meat grinder where you measured progress in inches, not miles. What's really wild is how fast this became the new normal. By September 1914, just a few months into the war, both sides had basically dug in and weren't moving. Sure, the trenches offered some protection, but they also created this bloody, miserable stalemate that would last for years. This wasn't just a tactic, it became the very symbol of the whole conflict.
And this is where our story takes a sharp turn. Because while the world's attention was glued to the battlefields of Europe, a completely different deadly force was gathering steam, almost entirely ignored by the history books.
So let's pull back the curtain on this hidden catastrophe. It's time to meet the unseen enemy that was stalking the globe during these exact same years.
We are talking about the 6th cholera pandemic, a massive, terrifying outbreak that actually started years before the first shots of WWI were fired, and it continued to claim lives until 1923, long after the world celebrated the war's end.
To really wrap your head around the scale of this, just look at that number. Over 800,000 people dead. And get this, that's in India alone. This was no small outbreak. It was a silent plague sweeping across the planet with a death toll that could rival major battles of the war.
This timeline does a fantastic job of just mapping its relentless journey. You can see it kicking off in India and then spreading like this slow-motion wave, following trade routes and human migration. It moves across Asia, into Russia, North Africa, Eastern Europe, and notice something. These are the very same regions being torn apart by the war and revolution.
So this brings us to the most crucial point of all. These were not two separate stories. They were two parallel crises, unfolding on the very same world stage, at the exact same time.
When you lay them out side by side like this, the picture becomes so clear, and it's stunning. Look at the duration. The war is this concentrated 4-year catastrophe, right? But the pandemic just smolders for over 20 years. And check out the theater of operations. One is a man-made conflict focused on Europe, while the other is a biological contagion with a much, much wider and quieter global footprint.
This right here, this is really the key takeaway. The era of the Great War was truly an age of overlapping crises. You had the very visible war, fought with guns and artillery. And then you had the invisible one, fought by doctors, public health officials, and the human immune system itself. And all of this leaves us with a final, pretty thought-provoking question, doesn't it? How does the dramatic, violent story of war manage to capture our collective memory so completely, while a silent, sprawling pandemic that killed hundreds of thousands of people becomes little more than a footnote in history? It's a powerful reminder of what we choose to remember and what we allow ourselves to forget.